Hello kids, this is Mr. Whistler recording from home, and here's your video lesson of the day. Today we're going to be talking about the French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763, and in Europe they called it the 7 Years' War, even though it lasted 9 years, which is kind of strange. We have a couple of vocabulary words today, and our first one is Parliament. Now the Parliament was the British legislature, or the people who made the laws in Britain. And here is Westminster Palace where they meet. Now the colonists had a problem with Parliament because they were making laws for the colonies without any colonists in Parliament. They had no representation. Now if you look at this map of Britain, it's broken up into several parts. And each one of these parts had people or representatives who worked in Parliament. Now these representatives represented their part of the country, and when they created laws, they had a voice in the creation of those laws. They had a say, and that was very important to them. Now the American colonies over here were supposed to be part of England, yet they had no representatives in Parliament, which made the colonists mad, and it made them feel like their rights as Englishmen were being violated. Second vocab word is militia. Now militia is a group of civilians trained to fight in emergencies. And really it's an army made up of regular people, and they basically go out once a month or once every couple of weeks, practice a little bit, and if there's emergency, that's who they called. Now the significance of a militia is they were not as good as professional soldiers, or what they like to call regulars. So militia, a group of civilians trained to fight in emergencies. Now, in the world in the 1700s, there were three big superpowers. There was Great Britain or England in the red, France in the blue, and Spain in the yellow. Now, the two big dogs were Great Britain and England, and they competed with each other for worldwide wealth. So you could say they were rivals. And this rivalry carried over into the Americas. They both competed for natural resources like lumber, land, and furs. By 1700, France and the British were the major powers in North America as well. And you can see their political divisions here. Britain is in the pink. Here's the 13 colonies. Here's some more British land up north. The French are sandwiched in between the British in the yellow area. The pink and yellow is land claimed by both Britain and France. And then Spain claims the green here. Now the British were more interested in land, and the French had created a really successful fur trading business, and they were making a ton of money. As the years went by, the British population increased, and eventually they needed more land, and they were looking to go this direction to the west to get more land. Well, the French were dead set against that. They knew how the English were with regard to land. They knew that if the English got over here, that they would try to take over, and it would mess up the French fur traders' business, and they wanted no part of that. So the major reason for this conflict between the French and the British was the French were determined to stop westward expansion by the English. And again, here are the English colonies, and the French are over here, and the English want to move over onto this land. French fur traders and the British both knew that whoever had the best trade terms with the Native Americans and got the most Native Americans help would probably win this war. they both got help from the Native Americans. The British got help from the Indians, and the French got help from the Indians. But the British lucked out and got the stronger Native American tribes on their side, so it really helped them. Now, in 1753, the British decided that they're going to try to move into this land. So they send a 21-year-old George Washington, a surveyor at the time, to tell the French that they were trespassing on British territory and to get out. So George Washington goes over there. He's 21 years old, and he runs into the French and he says, "Frenchies, you're on British territory. Get out." And the French respond, "No, George Washington, go away." So George Washington goes back to Virginia and tells them what happened. So they make him a lieutenant colonel in the militia, and they give him 150 men. And they want him to go back to where present-day Pittsburgh is today and build a fort. So he accepts the challenge. So George Washington takes his 150 militia out there, and when he gets there, the French are already building a fort there, Fort Duquesne. So Washington moves down the road a piece and builds his fort, which he calls Fort Necessity. Now, Washington's greatly outnumbered by the French. He has 150 men. The French have like 3,000. So one day Washington attacks the French with his 150 men. And of course he loses, but that shows a lot about George Washington. He's very brave. And he gets surrounded by the French, and he gets captured, and his army gets captured, and they get taken prisoner. Eventually they get released, and they go back to Virginia. When Washington gets back to Virginia, he writes down what happened, and he publishes it. And when word gets out what Washington did there, he becomes this huge, huge war hero. So Washington was considered a hero who struck the first blow against the French. And this marked the beginning of the French and Indian War. And they call it the French and Indian War because the British fought two enemies. They fought the French and they fought the Indians. Now the French and Indian War was really between France and England. And it was still part of the 7 Years' War over in Europe. After 9 long years of fighting, England finally defeated France. After the war, British and French leaders met in Paris to work out a peace treaty, which they called the Treaty of Paris. We had some famous guys there, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay. Here's the actual signing page of the Treaty of Paris with their signatures on it. Now, at this treaty, France basically lost all their land in North America. If you look at the two maps here, before the French and Indian War, French had the majority of the land in North America. Since they lost after the war, Britain took over all this land. Now, Spain made a secret deal with France right before the war ended, so they were able to secure this land all the way up to the Mississippi River. And there was nothing Britain could do about it because Spain had the paperwork for it. So the two European countries that controlled most of the land in North America after the Treaty of Paris were Spain and Britain. So the results. Britain won the war, so they got to make the rules. And their policy after the French and Indian War was to tax the colonies and stop the colonists from moving west. One result of the war was the need to raise taxes to pay for the war. Since Britain saved the colonists from the French, they thought it was only fair that the colonists pay their fair share for the war. A second result of the war was a stop to westward expansion. So they passed the Proclamation of 1763. King George III was sick of fighting, and he did not want to fight anymore with anybody, and especially the Indians. So he passed the Proclamation of 1763 to stop westward expansion. Now it doesn't really make sense, because that was the whole reason the British were fighting the war, so they could expand westward. The proclamation wasn't going to be forever, but they wanted to slow down westward expansion so they could get some rules in place so they can do it in an orderly fashion. So basically the Proclamation of 1763 stopped westward expansion. Nobody could go west of the Appalachian Mountains right here. Now this made some people mad, because they had already purchased land on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains. And how would you feel if you bought land over here and you couldn't go to it? So these two laws were the first of several that made the colonists feel like their rights as Englishmen were being violated. That's the video, and I'd like you to answer these questions. 1. Why did the colonists consider George Washington a hero early in his military career? 2. What did the Proclamation of 1763 do? 3. Why did the Proclamation of 1763 anger wealthy landowners? 4. Which two countries was the French and Indian War between? 5. What was the major reason for the conflict between France and Britain in the Ohio Valley? 6. After the Treaty of Paris, which European countries controlled most of the land in North America? And 7. What were the two results of the French and Indian War? Thanks, boys and girls, and have a good evening.